Good. Well, I want to introduce you to my book, The End of Night, and talk about this issue of the value of natural darkness and the costs from light pollution. It's a wide-ranging issue. It's not just about the night sky, the fact that we can't see it very well anymore. That's where we kind of begin, but then you'll see as I go through the presentation all the other ways that darkness and light impact our lives. As Tim mentioned, the book, I'm an English professor, I teach creative writing, I'm not a scientist. I like scientists, but the book is really a book of stories, and that's what I wanted. I wanted a book that people would want to read and that it would be accessible for them. And stories are really the way that we relate to things, I think, more than simply statistics. So I thought I'd start by reading you a couple things from the beginning of the book. The first is the epigraph, the little poem that I have at the front of the book to kind of set the mood. And this is by a wonderful American poet whose name is Wendell Berry. It's titled To Know the Dark. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. I was just in Tucson over the weekend at the book festival there, and I was speaking at the National Park Service tent. The national parks are really interesting because they now have what they call the Night Sky Team, and it's a group of national park officials who go around to all the different park service areas and they measure the darkness in the parks because darkness is one of the resources that the National Park Service is now sworn to defend. It's something we want to protect for, you'll see, for a variety of reasons. And I gave this talk at the Park Service tent and talking about how important darkness was and all the good work that the Park Service is doing, and then a woman came up to me later and said, yeah, I didn't want to say this in front of everybody, but I was just at XX National Park, and they took us on a moonlight hike, and they gave us all flashlights, which was totally, anathema to the whole idea. And when you take a flashlight out, it cuts your vision of what's around you down to just what's in the beam of light. So as Wendell Berry says, to know the dark, go dark. One of the first stories that I tell is a story of flying from my hometown of Minneapolis to Las Vegas, where I begin the book, and renting a car and driving out of Vegas in the evening as the sun was setting, and driving through some small towns and noticing the lighting there, and then finding myself in the middle of the desert in this just vast expanse of natural darkness. And I had an experience there on that highway that I'll read to you. In the Minneapolis suburb where I grew up lies a golf course with a road cutting through its center and a white picket fence on either side. As a teenager, I drove an old Volvo that allowed me to turn its headlights off and sail a sloping, curving road lit only by parking lights at 35 miles an hour. The red wagon I own now is too smart and too safe for that. The headlights remain on whether I want them to or not. And I assume the same is true of my brand new rental, but I'm wrong. The temptation is immediate and irresistible. And despite the fact I'm not going 35 miles an hour on this straight highway, but nearly 3 times 35, I rotate the dial. In an instant, the road disappears, my stomach drops, and I feel as though flung from the edge of the earth. The sensation is exhilarating fear, as my every fiber demands to know what I'm doing. I turn the headlights back on and feel my heart return to beating. The highway before and behind me holds no other cars, and no artificial lights shine in the black sea on either side. I turn the lights off again and again, longer each time, long enough for my eyes to focus on what little of the highway my parking lights reveal, long enough to look ahead at the starry night flowing toward and over and past, And think of Star Trek's Starship Enterprise accelerating into space, long enough to feel the car begin to float from the road's surface and fall into the sky. The temptation is to leave off the lights and to drive in the dark for more than these few moments. But while I'm happy to know the thrill of boldly going 100 miles an hour through the desert at nights, to feel catapulted from Earth into space, I am also happy to be alive, and so I slow to 20 miles an hour. It's what seems now a trolling speed, and so I turn even the parking lights off and lean my head from the driver's window. The warm, dry air flows over, the asphalt rolls underneath, and I realize I'm headed directly toward a meeting at the horizon with the Milky Way as it bends from one end to the other. As though on its own, the car slows to a stop in the middle of Route 93 in the middle of the Great Basin Desert. Any car or truck coming from either direction will show long before I'd need to move. Unless, of course, they are driving with their lights off, too. I'm not condoning that behavior, but it was a lot of fun. Let's jump right into the images. There's so much to talk about with this subject, and probably a lot of things that maybe you haven't thought of. As I said, if you've heard about light pollution, or if you've heard people talk about it, you may have heard it in terms of the night sky. And there's this misunderstanding that light pollution is only a problem for astronomers. And that's couldn't be farther from the truth. It's a problem for all of us. It's something that affects all of us. We'll get into that. Let me say, sometimes people ask me, how did this book come about? Why did you write this book? And I often say, it comes from growing up in Minnesota, and we have a cabin in the northern part of the States. And so I grew up with this being my night sky, and this being my experience of night, of the Milky Way over pine trees, or the moon, the full moon over the lake water. This was my experience of what night was, or walking through the woods that are so dark you can't see your hands in front of your face, that kind of darkness. And so I grew to appreciate and love this kind of natural darkness. And not only the sights that I'm showing you, but also the smells of the different seasons and the sounds of the northern Minnesota night, like wolves and loons and just the sounds of the lake alive. Really grew to love that. But I also loved nighttime in the suburb of Minneapolis where I grew up, and I would lie awake at night in bed listening to the sounds outside, and I would look outside and smell that. I've always loved nighttime. Unfortunately, we're losing this experience, this firsthand experience of a natural night. Maybe the most shocking estimate I found when I was researching the book is that 8 of 10 kids born in the US today will never live where they can see the Milky Way. And I would bet that most of those kids will just never see the Milky Way. They'll never get out of the city, or they'll never get to a place where they can see the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is kind of a litmus for us when it comes to the night sky. If you can see the Milky Way, it's fairly dark. It's not super dark, it's not naturally dark, but it's dark enough. And if you can't see it, that tells you that your sky is really polluted. And it's polluted by this. It's polluted by artificial lighting that is unshielded. And that's the really significant distinction that I want to make right off the bat, which is to say that artificial light at night is a good thing, right? We like lights, we're going to have lights. Light can help us be safer and more secure, right? Whether it's in a city or a college campus or wherever. But this kind of unshielded lighting, this is the parking lot at the JMU Arboretum. It's unshielded. The light's shining in all directions, up into the sky, into your eyes, into the woods, right? This is light pollution. This is also the JMU Arboretum, big spotlight set up in the middle of nowhere. So it's this idea that light is good, but we want to use it, rather than use it wastefully, we want to use it thoughtfully and intelligently and responsibly. We waste about 30% of all the light at night right now. That's wasted money, wasted energy. It also actually makes it nighttime more dangerous, not safer. And I'll explain that a little bit later. We send a lot of lights straight into the sky, like this one here, or bouncing them off billboards. We also have a lot of horizontally aimed light, like this, that's ostensibly supposed to light this parking lot. But this light is not only in the parking lot, but it's going horizontally out into the world, and I'll show you what happens there. The effect of all this unshielded light is to create a situation that many of you may have seen in this image, this compilation of satellite photographs of the Earth at nights. I like to say two things about this image. One is that it's beautiful. It's a pretty amazing image of our world at night. I don't deny that at all. Light in the context of darkness can be very beautiful, and I'll talk about that more at the end. But it's important to note that what we're seeing here is waste. This is all, or almost all, wasted light. It's that light that's going straight up into the sky or shining horizontally. It's not making us safer. It's not providing anything. It's a bunch of wasted light. Here's a close-up of the U.S. You can look, where we are on the East Coast is particularly lit up, less so in the West, but in a second I'll show you that. The thing that these photographs don't show is the spread of light out into the country. These photographs focus on the brightest spots, which of course are the cities and the suburbs, the smaller cities. One thing, we don't have a pointer, I don't think, but one crazy thing to point out, you see Chicago here on the bottom of Lake Michigan and my home in Minneapolis. Up there to the left, does anybody know what that is? Those lights? Yeah, fracking. Those are the fracking wells that are burning off gas at night. Whole other subject, but it's kind of cool to see it on that. When we talk about light pollution is an umbrella term we use, and beneath that umbrella, there are three primary terms I want to give you. The first one you've already seen an example of, which is glare. These are lights like this one shining in all directions, including straight into your eyes. The thing about, again, this issue of safety, because I know that's what you're thinking about, at least some of you, don't we need all this light for safety and security? Yeah, we need some light for safety and security. We don't need super bright lights that are making it harder for us to see at night. Right? So good examples of this are older drivers, maybe your grandparents or your parents who talk about how hard it is to drive at night. Part of that is because our eyes age, and that makes it harder to see at night. A lot of it is all the glary, as one guy in the book calls it, glary crap lighting that's shining into our eyes. That's making our eyes work really hard. Maybe you guys have even noticed for example, the new headlights, the new LED headlights. When they shine right at you, it blinds you. How is that making us safer, right? It makes it harder for us to see. So glare is a real problem. The second term to know is something that's called light trespass. And this is a great photograph of this. It's from Northland College in northern Wisconsin, where I taught for a couple of years. This is the brand new science building with its unshielded lights. And the lights are shining not only on that property, but across the street to light up this house where students have hung black curtains in the windows so that they can sleep at night. You can kind of see that in some of the windows. Light trespass. And it always strikes me as funny in our country where we're so obsessed with property rights that when it comes to artificial light at night, that seems to just kind of go out the window, right? You can spray your lights all over the place. You can light up your neighbor's house, and we're just supposed to accept that. And then thirdly, to go along with glare and light trespass, we have something called sky glow. That's what you see on the right here. It's over any city of any size around the world. It's the sky being lit up. This is the same thing when you see clouds lit up. That's on the right. This is such an interesting image because it's the same image in two different times. The time here on the left is in 2003 when there was a power outage here on the East Coast. This is a suburb of Toronto. One of the guys living on the street walked down the street and took a picture of the sky as it would be without all this sky glow. So glare, sky glow, light trespass. Every town has the same ingredients in this recipe of light pollution. This is a shot of Harrisonburg. I don't know if anybody recognized it. You can see the sky glow above the rise there. But I want to especially point out on the left here, the stadium lighting, right? A lot of towns have stadium lighting, incredibly bright, oftentimes on long before or long after the games are over. Street lights like these, parking lots, right? Parking lots are lit like this one far too often, all night long, and they're empty, right? So we have, one of the problems that we have is we have a real lack of imagination about how we light our world, right? So we light this parking lot at the same level at 9 or 10 o'clock at night when people are in it and moving around and kind of needing the lights as we do at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's empty and there's nobody there, right? So that's a waste of energy, a waste of money. Gas stations also. We think this because it's told that we're told that it's for safety and security. It's like a little bit for safety and security and a lot about getting you to stop and spend your money, right? It has everything to do with attracting us to spend our money here. They've actually done studies where they've watched as one gas station gets brighter and then the one down at the other corner gets brighter and then the other one gets brighter, right? Trying to pull in the customers, right? So estimates are that gas stations and parking lots are lit 10 times as brightly as they were 20 years ago. And Tim and I will tell you that 20 years ago is not so far away, so far in the past. Las Vegas, of course, the poster child for light pollution. But what I want to point out is on the right side, the electronic billboard, the digital billboard. These are spreading all over the country, incredibly bright and oftentimes lit all night long. So I told you before that these photographs are impressive, that they're images of waste, but that they also don't show the true extent of light pollution, the spread of lights. And I think, well, I know oftentimes we think, well, sure, there's a lot of light in the cities, but once you get out into the country, it's still dark, right? Or where I grew up, it's still dark. Yeah, it's dark, but it's not as dark as it used to be. It's not naturally dark. And worse of all, it's getting brighter. The thing about light pollution is that it grows fairly rapidly, like I just said, 10 times as bright as it was 20 years ago, but just slow enough that it's really hard to notice, right? If we could jump back 20 years, we could take a class field trip, we would notice how bright it is now when we come back to the present day. But since it just grows a little bit each night, it's really hard to notice. And so, about 15 years ago, a couple of Italian astronomers wanted to show the true extent of light pollution. And so they took this data, these photographs, and using computers and colors, they made what they called the World Atlas of the Artificial Night Sky Brightness. So it's basically a world atlas of light pollution, the spread of light pollution. And what I'd like, before I show you this same image from their atlas, notice the main cities, right? You can see London, Paris, Madrid, on the Italian peninsula, Milan, Rome, Naples here. Notice too, though, in northern Italy, that it seems like there's a valley of darkness, right? That's kind of a big, long space of darkness. Now I'll show you their map, and you can notice, you can still see the white splotches of London and Paris, Madrid, Milan, Rome, etc. But look at that what looked like a black valley is now green, signifying that it's not naturally dark. In fact, it's not even close to naturally dark. To get to natural darkness, you have to get out into the oceans, right? Even close to shore, it's not naturally dark anymore. So this gives you a sense. It's just a way of helping you realize the spread of artificial lights in our world. I was just in South America a little while ago, so I added this. You can also see where it is really dark, still the Amazon. Here's our country, and you can see how the east is particularly lit up. That little splotch of black is West Virginia, back in the Dark Ages. The shocking thing about this image is that it's almost 20 years old. It's from data from 1997. And one of the things, and it has not gotten better, it's definitely gotten worse. One of the things they did with this image from 97 is they wanted to show us the growth of light pollution. They wanted to show the trajectory, where we've been, where we're headed. And so they took this data and they estimated back to the 50s and the 70s. And that's what this looks like. So you have the 50s there, the 70s, the data they actually had, and then they estimated forward to 2025. You can see in 2025, there's no place east of the Great Plains that isn't polluted by light. Here's another way to think about the spread of light pollution and what we don't or do experience. This is something called the Bordel Scale. It's made by an astronomer. His name is John Bordel. It's a 9-point scale. This is an abbreviated version. Starts with 9. It's a scale of darkness. 9 being our brightest places like Las Vegas or Times Square, really any major city, down to 1 being natural darkness, meaning no evidence of artificial light. Nothing in the sky, nothing on the horizon, right? When I started my book research, I called my friend at the Park Service and I said, hey Chad, where can I go to experience a level 1 darkness? Because wouldn't that be really cool? And he said, Australia would be a great place to start, right? Kind of joking. And I said, no, in the US. And he said, you might get lucky. You might find it someplace, but a lot of people would say there is no level 1 darkness left. And in fact, when I went out with another guy from the Park Service, and I'll show you a couple photographs he took at the end, he told me he'd taken measurements of darkness in 200 Park Service locations. So they go to all the parks, some parks they go to different sites, they take measurements. He said out of 200 measurements all over the country, he'd given 3 a level 1 status, so no evidence of artificial light. So it really has become an endangered experience. In fact, most Americans live most of their lives in levels 5 and above on this. Right? We rarely or never experience anything darker. So for the book, I borrowed that idea, I borrowed that scale. I started in the brightest places and I worked my way down to some darker places. And I wanted to show that to you, but I also wanted to show you this slide because I want to show you, again, the way that this issue isn't just an astronomer's issue, it's an issue that affects us all. So in the first 2 chapters, I talk about the history of lighting and go to London and Paris and all that. In the 3rd chapter, chapter 7, this is a chapter all about safety and security. Because again, that's the main thing we're taught. Well, we need all this light for safety and security, right? That is actually an incredibly complex issue. Sometimes, yeah, lighting helps us be safer. Sometimes light makes us even endangers us, right? So to think that because some light is good, more light will automatically be better, is really simplistic, and you can't apply that thinking to a complex issue. So I worked really hard on that chapter. I talked to, and we can talk about this hopefully in this class, I talked to a lot of my friends who are women, right? Because the experience of being a woman in this country at night is different than being a man, right? It just seems to be a truth for us. Worked very hard on that. Chapter 6 is a chapter about the effect of artificial lighting on our physical health. And studies are showing increasingly that exposure to artificial light at night, electric lights, is bad for us. And primarily in 3 ways. Some of this you might have in your own life. It affects our sleep. It contributes to sleep disorders, which are tied to every major disease: obesity, cancer, diabetes, depression, right? If you take nothing away from this lecture, take this away, you should be sleeping in the dark, right? No lights coming in from the window, under the door, no appliances, whatever. Sleep in as pure darkness as you can. Our bodies, like the bodies of every creature in this world, evolved with bright days and dark nights. We need light, there's no doubt about it. We need darkness as well. Our bodies need darkness. Right? It's that natural cycle. And the second way that artificial light confuses our physical health is that it screws with our circadian rhythms, those 24-hour rhythms that orchestrate our body's health. And the third way, and this is the one that always gets people's attention the most, is that we have found now that exposure to artificial light at night impedes the production of the hormone melatonin in our blood, right, in our body. Melatonin is only produced in our body in the dark. So if you sleep with the light on, it's not producing. If you get up in the night and you turn on the light to go to the bathroom, it stops producing, right? And the reason this is significant, the main reason, is that they've discovered a lack of melatonin in the bloodstream is associated with an increased risk for breast and prostate cancer. Right? They found this in folks working the night shift, particularly nurses working the overnight shift. In fact, when you add all these physical, human health effects of artificial light at night, you get the results, which is the World Health Organization naming working shift work a probable carcinogen, right? And you get the American Medical Association a couple of years ago issuing a statement in support of controlling light pollution, that they recognize that this isn't a good thing. So, not simply an issue for astronomers, right? Chapter 5 is all about the environmental effects. This is maybe the chapter that means the most to me. It's one thing, again, to sort of harm ourselves with this light. It's another thing to harm all the creatures that depend on darkness, like the 60% of invertebrates, insects, that need darkness, that are nocturnal, or the 30% of vertebrate species that are nocturnal. All the other creatures that are crepuscular, they're active at dawn and dusk, right? You may have heard, for example, of sea turtles that come on the shore, they lay their eggs as they have for hundreds of millions of years, and they've evolved over hundreds of millions of years so that when the sea turtles, the hatchlings come up, they scurry toward the brightest light on the horizon, which for hundreds of millions of years was the moon and the stars over the ocean. Now, unfortunately, in too many places, it's the condominiums and the hotels and the streetlights behind them. So they come up and they go the wrong way. Birds migrate at night. More than 400 species of birds in North America migrate at night. They're drawn off course by the lights. A lot of the birds that you hear about crashing into windows in the day were sucked into the city by lights at night, and they can't figure their way out of the maze of buildings, and they fly into buildings. Chapter 4 is maybe my favorite chapter right now. It's about the value of metaphoric darkness, right? Sadness, melancholy, depression. It's part of being a human being. We try to push that darkness away as much as we try to push the natural darkness away. And then the last 3 chapters talk about what we can do about this issue. Lots of creatures depend on night, and I would say in terms of cities and nature, this is certainly true in the cities. A lot of wildlife comes out at night after we go inside. This is a really good slide, a good example of light pollution destroying habitat, right? For any nocturnal creature, these woods they're done. They can't exist there. Right? But this issue of safety and security, Harrisonburg was just ranked, I guess last year, one of the top 10 safest cities in the US. But when I went to Home Depot, this is what I met with, right? The same same message that we're always met with, which is we need all this light for safety and security to deter crime and keep our families safe. It would be one thing if it were shielded lighting that was good lighting, or motion sensors, that kind of thing. These lights, especially these kind of lights, which are primarily what they sell. In fact, I counted at Home Depot the number of what we call night sky friendly lighting, where the light is only going down. For the lights you could buy for your house, there were 6, which I thought was pretty cool. There were 6, and there were 85 lights that were like this, right? So unfortunately, somebody doesn't know anything about this issue. They want to buy some lights for their new home. They walk into Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. Well, I should have meant that Lowe's is doing better than Home Depot, so down with Home Depot. They don't have any idea. They're just going to choose a light that looks good. Primarily, for lights for our houses, we tend to buy what we call brass and glass. They're fixtures that look good in the daytime, and then at night they spew light everywhere. So the effect of this on safety and security, let me show you 2 images that really will show you what I've been saying already. This a yard in Tucson, Arizona with a typical what we call security lights, you know that term probably, or what some of my astronomer friends call an insecurity light. It's shining in all directions, including, most significantly in the slide, right into your eyes, right? Imagine you're the photographer, you're standing here taking a picture of this, you're all lit up, right? That light is shining right into your eyes. You can't see anything that's in the shadows. And so the next image I'll show you, the only difference is that you as the photographer are going to hold your hand up to shield that light. You're not turning it off, you're not even turning it down, you're just shielding it so it can only go straight down. As I talked about, when you do that, you can see the bad guy in the fence. You can go back, he's there. Right? So think about this as you're walking across campus at night and you're facing bright lights that are glaring in all directions, right? It's something you can try the next time you're out. Just hold up, well, first notice how you can't see past the light. Anybody who's on the other side of the light who's walking towards you, you can't see their face. Hold up your light and see how much better instantly you can see beyond that, right? So to shield our lights, it helps our eyes see better. It eliminates the shadows where the bad guys can hide, where they can see you the whole time, right? Because you're all lit up. You can't see them. So the message I want to leave is not that we want to turn off all the lights. That's not it at all. We want lighting that's shielded, that's intelligent and thoughtful, right? And that this issue of safety and security is a complex issue that's not settled by simply plowing more lights into whatever environment we're talking about. I remember talking to a guy in London who was controlled the lights for one of the most dangerous boroughs of London, and we were sitting at his desk, and he said, you know, if we turn, there was a light hanging down in between us, and he said, you know, if we turn this light up bright enough, you and I couldn't see each other, and we're sitting across the table from each other. So this notion that just turning up the lights will somehow make us brighter is really not true. So here's another image that kind of shows you the same thing. Can't really see the bad guy, but if you shield him, you can, and you bring back the stars too. We can do this with all kinds of lighting. We can do it with stadium lighting, or like this, softball fields, right? There's more light on the field now and no light going up into the sky. We can do it with street lights like this, where the light itself, the lamp itself, is actually up in the fixture. It can only shine straight down, and there's no glass in the fixture, so the lighting particles can only go straight down. They can't bounce in any direction, and you get this effect. This is in Winston-Salem. This is a shot of a street in Florence, Italy. It's a little blurry, but it shows you that you can see all the way down the street because there's no light shining directly in your eyes, right? All right, so we can come back to that if you want. But let me close with a couple images of, as I said before, lights and darkness and beauty. I really love nighttime, and one of the things I love is how beautiful it is, both natural light and even artificial light, like this, the Houses of Parliament in Big Ben in London, or like this in Paris. How many people, just show of hands, have been to Paris? A few, yeah. Known as the City of Light, not for lighting, but for the Enlightenment, but people think it's, well, we still call it the City of Light, right? We think it's because of the lighting. And it really is very beautiful. The lighting is very thoughtful. They've spent the last 30 years relighting the whole city to create these beautiful experiences that people come from all over the world to see. In fact, they spent 10 years just relighting Notre Dame. And kind of a funny story, the guy who, the lighting designer, the head lighting designer, said the priests let them do everything they wanted to the lighting, for the lighting, except for two things. They wanted to light up the rose window and from the inside, and the priest didn't want them to do that. And then they had this idea to have what they called a light bell, that at the top of the hour, a strobe light would go the length of the cathedral, like this, for each hour. And the priest said, no, this is a cathedral, not a disco. But think of the way we use light to create romance, to create ambiance. And think about this. I think this is my favorite image of the whole piece, this image of the single human being by the ocean, by the Milky Way. And what I would say about this is we've taken what was once one of the most common human experiences, walking out your door and coming face to face with the universe, and we've made it one of the most rare human experiences. This almost never happens anymore. What are the effects? What are the costs? Monetary-wise, light pollution costs us about $100 billion a year, every year, worldwide. So there's money, there's energy. We talked a little bit about the safety costs, the environmental costs, the physical, human health costs. And then there are also these intangible costs, like what's the effect losing this experience on our souls and our spirits? What's the effect on, what would have been the effect on somebody like Van Gogh, right? Who painted this in 1888 at a time when the only artificial lighting were the gas lamps you can see in the houses down here, right? When I talked with Joaquin Pissarro, who's the great-grandson of Camille Pissarro, the contemporary of Van Gogh, he said, you know, some people think, I love this description, he says, people think Van Gogh was just a werewolf of energy, right? But he said he was also painting a night sky that we don't know anymore. Right? You see in his letters to his brother Theo that he describes the color of the stars over Paris. And if you've been to Paris, or if you've been to any major city, if you've been to Charlottesville, you know you don't see the colors of stars anymore. You're lucky to see stars. So a friend of mine who's an astronomer in Texas actually thought he would update this painting for us. Imagine what Van Gogh would have painted these days, and here's his painting from today. Van Gogh did a lot of night sky photographs. Kind of a couple cool things about this one. Astronomers have discovered that the Big Dipper that you see there on the top was not actually there that night. It was actually behind Van Gogh, so Van Gogh used a little bit of artistic license to put it in there. And the other cool thing is that you can go to the spot where he stood and painted this under the gas lights. It's in Arles in the south of France. So I went there for the book and I waited till it got dark. They have a poster at the spot saying, on this spot Van Gogh painted this painting. And here it is. So you can see the poster there. You're so blinded by the light by the time you get there, though it's tough to see. So, two images to close here. One is, this is from an experience at Valley National Park. And it looked like this. This image is really true to what I saw. I'll never forget that night facing north and watching stars rise up out of the horizon and in the east and fall off the edge of the earth in the west. Just amazing to see the universe turning above you. And yet, you can see in the bottom right corner here, the glow from Las Vegas. So even in a place like this, that was really an amazing experience I'll never forget, it would only rank a 2 on that scale. It's not naturally dark anymore. Here is a naturally dark place. This is taken by one of the National Park Service guys. It is in Death Valley as well. It's just a different part of the park where that glow is blocked. This is in black and white, obviously. This is a place called the Racetrack, a level 1 image. So there are those places out there that we can